Hi, it's Steve from PartSelect. Today we're going to show you how to change the transmission on your washer, and it's a really easy job. All we're going to need is a 1/4-inch nut driver, a number 2 Phillips screwdriver, and a small flat blade screwdriver, and either a number 20 Torx bit or a 1/8 Allen key bit. You need a pair of slip joint pliers, a 3/8 socket with an extension on a ratchet, a 1/2-inch socket and ratchet, and a 1/2-inch wrench. And if you can find a spanner wrench and a large hammer, you'll be all set. Let me show you how we do it. Now, before we begin this repair, the first thing we're going to need to do is pull the washer far enough forward that we'll be able to tilt it back. So we'll need to disconnect the inlet water supply, disconnect the drain hose and the power, and we'll also want to put something on the floor to protect the floor as well. Now, our next step will be to remove the agitator. So using a 1/4-inch nut driver, we'll locate the retaining screw on the side of the barrel of the agitator, and we'll just loosen that screw a few turns, and then you should be able to pull the agitator straight up and off of the agitator shaft, and we'll set that aside. Now next we'll remove the 2 screws that secure the front panel, and if you wish you can tilt the washer back if you have a spot where you can rest it up against, and remove those 2 screws, and then just lift away at the bottom of the front panel, tilt it and let it drop down to release the 2 spring clips at the top, and then set that aside. Now next we can remove 2 3/8 bolts that secure the main top to the cabinet. So using your ratchet and socket, just remove those bolts. Once we remove both of those bolts, we'll carefully lower the washer into an upright position. Now if your model has a bleach dispenser on it, we'll next need to disconnect that bleach hose, and then we can raise the main top and the lid and support that lid as we raise the main top. It should stay in an upright position, and then you can open the lid. Now our next step will be to remove the tub cover. Now on models that use a plastic tub cover, it's just held in place with large plastic tabs that run around the perimeter. Now on models that use a metal tub cover, there will be a band clamp that secures the tub cover to the outer tub, and there will also be 2 bolts that secure that clamp in diagonal corners. So simply loosen the one at the front as much as possible and then pry that clamp off. And carefully lift the tub cover off and set it aside. Well, next we're going to remove the tub nut so that we can lift the inner basket out. Now you will need a spanner wrench and a large hammer to remove that tub nut. And it is a left-hand thread, so we're going to turn it clockwise to loosen it. So set the spanner wrench down on top of the tub nut, and make sure we place that wrench firmly into that tub nut. And then using our hammer, give it a sharp rap. And if you find that it's not moving, or if the whole mounting stem turns with that nut, also stop and just chisel it off at that point. So using a nice sharp chisel, we'll just go right into the edge of that. And do the same thing on the opposite side. And once we split that, just knock the 2 pieces aside and remove the collar, and then we're ready to lift the tub out. And you may need some assistance to lift that because it is fairly heavy. Now with the inner tub removed, we now have access to the mounting stem, and there is a set screw that secures that to the top part of the transmission housing. The older models will use an 1/8-inch Allen hex key, and newer models will have a number 20 Torx. Determine which bit will fit that set screw, then remove it, and then we'll take our spanner wrench again, and we'll set that down into that mounting stem, and again it is a left-hand thread, so we're going to turn it clockwise to loosen it, and once we've loosened it, we'll just turn that all the way off the top of the transmission, and then we can lift it away and discard it. And again, if it refuses to come off, you will need to take a chisel and cut down through 2 sides of it to split it. Then next we're going to remove the boot seal that sits around the tub bearing. We'll just get a good firm grip on that and twist it and then pull it straight off. And now we're ready to remove the bolts for the outer tub. Now next we'll need to remove the bolts that secure the outer tub to the support legs. Now they're 1/2-inch bolts. There is a rubber washer under the head of that bolt, so we're going to try not to turn the bolt itself. We'll just turn the nut. So there'll be the nut, a lock washer, a large rectangular flat washer, and it will normally have an X stamped on it. And if you look at the edge of that flat washer, you will see that there is a bit of a curvature that will match the curvature of the tub. So the X portion should always face out. And normally there will be 2 different sizes of these bolts. The bolt at the front will be a little bit shorter than the 2 at the rear. There's also a fiber washer between the outer tub and the support leg. Normally it will stick to that outer tub, but if it doesn't, make sure that you retrieve it for use when reassembling. So just continue to remove all 3 bolts. Now once we've removed all 3 bolts, our next step will be to remove the tub to pump hose. So using a 5/16 nut driver, just loosen that clamp and slide the clamp down on the hose, and then twist the hose until it breaks free of the tub. Release it. Then next, just lift up on that outer tub, pull it completely off of the transmission, and then just rest it like that so that we can next remove the clamp that secures the air dome tube to the side of the tub. So using a pair of slip joint pliers, simply going to compress that clamp, slide that up the air dome tube, and again we'll just twist that tube and release it. And we can now set that outer tub aside. Now next we'll put that main top back down, and we'll secure it with one of the 3/8 bolts. Then next we're going to tilt that washer back, make sure it's firmly supported. Then next we're going to remove this little rubber cap over the center of that main drive pulley. And below that you'll see a small drive lug with a Phillips screw in the middle of it. So we're just going to remove the screw. There is a countersunk washer. Now there is a countersunk washer that is attached to that screw. Then next we're just going to rock that drive lug back and forth until we release it. And if it doesn't come off easily, just take a small flat blade and go in under one edge and just pry it off gently. And the drive lug is splined to the bottom of that transmission shaft. And just set that aside for now. And we can roll the belt off of the pump and the drive pulley. Set those aside. And then we can rotate that main drive pulley counterclockwise from the bottom until it rolls off of the shaft, and we'll set that aside. Next, we can carefully stand the washer back up again, and you can remove that 3/8 bolt that secures the main top. Then carefully lift the top up while supporting the lid, and then open the lid. Now that we've removed the drive lug and the main drive pulley, we should be able to just lift that transmission out of the damper base. So just pull straight up on it and remove it. Now before we install a new one, we'll want to remove this slinger from the bottom of the old transmission and transfer it onto the new one. So to remove that water slinger, we're just going to get a good grip on that and push it down over the lip on that shaft and slide it completely off. And then we'll just do the reverse to mount it on the new transmission. And once it's up over that collar, you have it in the right position. Now before we proceed, we should also look at the sleeve for that tub bearing and see what kind of condition that's in. And if it's worn like this one is, chances are the tub bearing that's in the outer tub is in bad shape as well, and you should probably replace that while we have the machine apart. The new tub bearing will come with a new sleeve and bearing. Now if the old tub bearing was in good shape, you should be able to slide that sleeve off of the old transmission just by pulling up on it. And if it won't come off, you would need to replace it anyways. Now we'll take note on that new transmission that on the top portion of it there are some threads that are cut away. And that's done for a reason, so that when we actually install our new mounting stem, where the set screw will go through will be in that area where there are no threads. And we also want to take caution that when we tighten that mounting stem down, that we don't have that set screw lined up where there is a relief groove cut into the top portion of that housing. So just take note of that when you actually put that mounting stem on there, that the screw will sit somewhere else other than in that groove. We're now ready to put the new transmission in. So just make sure that there's no grit or dirt on that spline on the bottom, and then just lower it into the center of the damper. You may need to rotate it enough to line the splines up. And then next we'll get the sleeve. And next we'll install the sleeve for the tub bearing on top of the transmission. And then we'll prepare the outer tub to put in. Now before we install the tub, we'll want to inspect that center portion of the outer tub where the boot seal is going to sit, because it is just a friction fit and we want to make sure we have a nice clean surface all the way around. So if there's any crud here, we'll just get rid of that first and clean that area up. And once we've got that nice and clean and dry and good surface for that boot seal to sit on, we can go ahead and install that. Now before we install that boot, we'll want to just lubricate the inner lip of that with a little bit of moisture, as well as the outer lip of that tub, and then just carefully twist that on there, being very cautious that we don't put any pressure on the top portion of the seal, as that's a carbon ring and it will fracture if you put any twist on it. So grasp it down low, rotate it back and forth until it seats firmly on the bottom of that tub, and then you should be able to easily push that in and out to clear the tub bearing. And now we're ready to put the tub back in. So we'll start by just supporting that tub on the cabinet, and we'll reconnect our air dome tube. So it needs to be positioned so that it's straight up and down on the side of that tub. Just rotate the clamp into position and then center the tub over the transmission. And now we can reinstall the bolts. Now as mentioned, there will be two long bolts and one that's a little bit shorter, and the shorter one will go in the front. So we'll push the bolt through from the inside first, making sure that the fiber washer is in between the tub and the support. And we're going to lay that rectangular washer with the cross facing out, then a lock washer, and then the nut. Now using a wrench, we'll keep the bolt from turning on the inside so that it doesn't distort the rubber gasket on it. And just tighten that a bit first until we get the rear bolts in position. So just continue to do that with the two rear legs. Again, making sure that the fiber washer is still in position. Now once we have all three bolts started, start tightening them up. And again, make sure that we don't allow the head of that bolt to turn so that it doesn't twist the rubber gasket. Now next, we'll reconnect the tub to pump hose. Make sure it's fully inserted onto the nipple from the tub, and position the clamp and tighten it. Before we install the new mounting stem, we'll first remove the set screw from the side of it. Then just make sure that the inner surface of that is clean and that the Teflon ring is in place. And slide it down over the agitator shaft, and then tighten it counterclockwise. Then we'll use our spanner wrench to tighten it. Give it a couple of taps, and then we'll reinstall that set screw. Now, we suggest that you tighten that set screw really tight at first, then just back it off a couple of turns, and then just tighten it snugly. And now we can put the inner tub back in. So just gently lower that inner tub over top of the mounting stem. Just roll it around a bit until it centers. And set the collar in place and the tub nut. And again, it's a left-hand thread, so we will turn it counterclockwise to tighten it. And we want to make sure that this nut is tight, so give it a couple of pretty good wraps. Now next, we'll put the tub cover back on. So if your model uses the plastic tub cover, we'll locate this out of balance tab in the right rear corner, and then just line up the locking tabs and then squeeze the tub cover to the outer tub until they latch in place. We can now put the main top back down and then line up the holes for the 3/8 bolts in each corner. And we suggest that you start both of those bolts before you tighten either one of them, just to make sure that they line up properly. You may have to push the main top back to line up those holes. And if your model has a bleach dispenser, remember to reconnect that bleach hose securely. Check both the top and the bottom. We're now ready to put the drive pulley on. So we'll start by tilting the washer back. Make sure it's firmly supported. And if you wish, you can lay it directly on its back. We'll then pull the little protective cover off of the bottom shaft. We'll then take the drive pulley with the bearing intact. And in case that bearing has fallen off, you need to make sure that it is put on in the proper position. It will fit both ways. One way sits a little higher than the other, so put it on the position where it sits the lowest. Then rotate that pulley onto the bottom shaft, and then turning it clockwise, just give it a couple of good turns until you see the transmission moving. Now next we're going to install that drive lug, and if you look carefully at it, you'll see that it has a rounded side and then a slightly sharper flat side. Well, the round side will face down. There's also a little drive lug on one side of it. Well, we want to position that drive lug when facing the bottom of that pulley. You'll see there's also a stop lug. Now when installing the drive lug on that bottom shaft, we'll have to line it up properly with the stop lug on the pulley. So what we want to do is we'll rotate that pulley clockwise from the bottom until we start to meet the resistance of the brake, and you just see the transmission start to turn. Now at that point, we will position that drive lug so that the leading edge of it is about 1/4 of an inch before the stop lug on the pulley. Now make sure that we have that drive lug pushed firmly on the shaft, and don't use the screw to pull it on. The screw is just there to hold it in place. So secure it with that single screw, and put the little grease cap over top of the assembly, and it will snap onto that bottom pulley. Some models will have a rubber grease cap and others will use a plastic material. We can now put the drive belts back on. So the thicker of the two belts will fit on the top portion of that motor drive pulley and then around the large drive pulley on the transmission. And the thinner of the two belts will go across the front from the motor to the pump. And that belt is normally fairly loose, so if you haven't moved the pump, it should be fine. And check the condition of those belts before you put them on. If they show any signs of being glazed or any burnt spots, they should be replaced with the manufacturer's suggested belt. We're now ready to put the front panel on. So we'll take our front panel and we're going to hook these two spring clips under the main top. So tilt the panel out and keep an upward pressure on it until it hooks in at the top, and then just pivot it down into position. We'll reinstall the two Phillips screws to secure it. We'll now put the agitator back in. Just lower that down onto the agitator shaft, rotate it till it splines line up. Then with our 1/4 inch nut driver, we'll locate that retaining screw on the side of the agitator barrel, tighten it. There should be a little up and down movement on that agitator, which is normal. We're now ready to reconnect the supplies and the power and the drain hose, and our repair is complete. I told you it was an easy job. Thanks for watching, and good luck with your repair.